There is breaking news now from the war in Syria, and this could be significant. Reports that chemical weapons have been used in that conflict. Now, if confirmed, this would be the first time that chemical weapons have been entered into this ongoing civil war, a war that stretches for 2 years. But which side used it? Now, state-run Syrian news agency claiming that 25 are dead in a rebel chemical attack in northern Syria. That means the government in Damascus is blaming the rebels. Connor Powell working this story live at our Middle East Bureau with more from there. Connor, what can you report?
Well, Bill, there's a lot of conflicting information right now coming out of Syria. According to Western intelligence officials, they tell us that unlike the reports that we're hearing right now out of Syria, that in fact it was the Assad regime used some type of chemical weapons on rebels in northern Syria, around the Aleppo region. Now, of course, the Assad regime and the Assad state television have said that rebels used those weapons. But what we're hearing right now from Western intelligence officials is just the opposite, that in fact it was the Assad regime used some type of chemical weapons and killed somewhere between 15 and 26 people. Again, conflicting reports. We've heard 15. We've also heard 26. So there is a lot of differing information right now. But we have confirmed, of course, that there have been some type of chemical weapons being used in Syria. Now, who's used them on exactly which group is still very much unclear right now, Bill.
Connor, thank you. It's just one line that's crossing the Associated Press at the moment here. Reuters was reporting on this a bit earlier as well, so we're sorting through this now on our end. Connor, come back when you have more. Thanks from Jerusalem there. Martha?
Our thanks to him. And this is breaking news right now. We want to bring in Ambassador John Bolton and get his reaction to this. You heard what Connor Powell just told us. What do you think, Ambassador?
Well, I don't take anything the Assad regime says at face value, so when they claim the rebels used chemical weapons, it's just as likely as he reported that it was the regime that used chemical weapons and is blaming it on the rebels. But I don't think it's impossible that the rebels could get hold of chemical weapons. We don't know where all of the regime's arsenals were. It's possible some fell into the opposition hands. But whoever used chemical weapons, if in fact that's verified, that would be a significant change in this conflict, and it would underline both the risk to civilians of either side using chemical weapons in the Syrian conflict, or that those weapons could fall into hands that take them out of Syria for use by terrorists around the world. And that should be a top American priority, preventing that from happening.
And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that earlier in this conflict, the administration here basically said that that was something of a red line, you know, that they were discouraging any use of chemical weapons, but that would change this game, so to speak.
Yeah, well, red lines come and go for the Obama administration. We'll see. I think obviously we need hard facts here as to exactly what's going on. I think it's difficult to affect the use of chemical weapons inside Syria directly because you're talking about very close circumstances, regime, civilians, opposition. Hard to get in the middle of that, but it certainly should underline to us the risk that these weapons could come loose, fall into the hands of terrorists or regime officials who would sell them to terrorists and get out of the country.
I mean, we know how hard it has been to get good reports out of Syria. It's obviously such a danger zone at this point. What do you think the likelihood, and how soon will we get a good handle on what really happened here and perhaps see evidence of these chemical weapons being used?
Well, I'm sure that tracking these weapons is already a high priority for our intelligence. It now needs to be, I think, a higher priority in light of these reports. And finding out where the weapons may have been moved to, whether other units of the Syrian army or the opposition may be prepared to use them, but certainly on absolute high alert on the borders and exit points from Syria to make sure that none of these weapons are getting outside the country.
Well, thanks for your reaction to this breaking news. And we also want to get your thoughts on the other story that we originally brought you on here to talk about this morning, and that is this bombshell new report that claims that a hacker has begun to distribute confidential memos on the Benghazi terror attacks. The hacker reportedly stole emails that a former White House aide sent to former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and began sending them out to a range of public figures. What do you think about this?
Well, I think it's very interesting. This former Clinton aide here is a political advisor. He's not a foreign policy expert, at least the last time I looked. And yet he's sending memos to the Secretary of State on Benghazi. Now, let me say, I don't think there's anything improper about that, but it certainly underlines that the political nature of the administration's handling of the post-Benghazi environment. And I can't wait to read these memos. I'm sure they'll be a real treat. I think it will simply increase demands in Congress for answers about the real facts of Benghazi that after 6 months we still haven't gotten.
You know, I mean, the thoughts on hacking, you know, everybody has their feelings about how this should be handled. And, you know, the fact that the law doesn't seem to accurately crack down on the people's ability to sort of tap into, you know, private exchanges. But one thing I think it truly highlights here is that if there's a need in social media and even extending into these lawbreakers to learn more about what happened, it does it not say something about the energy in this country to produce some truth in this matter?
Yeah, well, I think there should be more protection for intellectual property on the Internet for people's own communications, but I certainly have no faith in the privacy protections now. That's why my emails are pretty boring. But, you know, this is dealing with sensitive matters of national security. It does raise a question, I think, whether classified information may have been compromised and what exactly were the nature of these communications. And when you consider that other administration officials, former EPA Administrator Lisa Jackson, were using non-government channels for their emails, you have to wonder, really, what's going on inside the administration more broadly.
And one of the biggest questions that surfaced in the last couple of days, and a number of folks on Capitol Hill are pressing this issue, is that we haven't heard from any of these survivors. When you think about the fact there's 33 people out there, I can't really remember a story where something this big and this awful happened, that we just don't hear anything from all of the people who were there.
Right. Well, you know, normally I think it's not a prudent course for Congress to be interfering in executive branch affairs, questioning low-level people and the like. But I think this is really an extraordinarily different circumstance. It has not to do simply with Benghazi, but about potential threats and what the response ought to be to American posts, embassies, consulates, and American official personnel and private citizens all around the world. Not being able to understand fully what happened at Benghazi means it's impossible to take the appropriate remedial and protective steps elsewhere, which is what Congress is trying to do. And the whole thing has, to me, just been a self-inflicted wound by the administration. If there's no political cover-up, if they don't have anything to hide, why not get the story out so that Congress and the public as a whole can react?
That's the big question. And it's still unanswered. Ambassador Bolton, thank you very much. Good to talk to you.
Thank you, Martha.